Of course, Holland is full of light. I mean, it's bad weather, but often, but nevertheless, there's always this flatness and the horizon and this amazing, very special light. So this must all be of influence on our way of thinking and designing.
And I do think that's very Dutch, actually, that there is no desire to shun the obvious. I mean, our office has some very intellectual and insightful moments, but I can assure you it also has incredibly banal moments, and even with very basic, practical, obvious criticisms. And I think that's a very Dutch thing too, that it's in the end not a nation of highbrow, but also a very down-to-earth nation that also at the right moments treasures its banality.
What I think is really Dutch is a kind of course, yeah, that's the mentality not to be able to be proud or to brag about your own qualities, which is completely against our Calvinist culture. You are absolutely not important. And so you just you work hard, you do your best, but you will never say, like in America, when you try to get a new job, I'm the one you need.
And right now you see a lot of traditional architecture being more and more popular, and so it's a whole different attitude. So where there's a lot of these offices, they all went out. West 8, OMA, of course, with UN Studio, KCRP, Neutlings, they have more and more work outside Holland, and that's why they survive on right now, actually, because there's much more. So when we do competition or selection in the Netherlands, there will be like 80 offices applying. We end up somewhere number 40 or so. It's very hard to get projects for us in Holland.
So we have won a competition for a university campus in Amsterdam. For us, that is really a completely new situation because we always work in other countries. And so now the first time we have a site near us, we can go on the bicycle and check something and, call and say, can we come by? But we work in Qatar and, in desert countries and in Riga and in everywhere else. And then it's always a major thing to go there and to understand it.
Well, our buildings are modern. And in that sense, they're by definition not national, because no nation has a monopoly on modernism, And in architecture, it's in many ways accepted to be modern. I mean, most well-known architects are now modern architects of sorts who operate internationally. So, I mean, our reality as practicing architects, is already an integrated Europe.
Yeah, you have this Dutch modernism, super Dutch, blah, blah, blah. And it must be really exciting now in Holland. Nothing new, Just all the classicists are all there all the time. So there's so many things now happening next to each other, and only from abroad they only focused on a few offices that were doing different stuff. But at the same time, there was just a whole lot of regular stuff being built. So the only difference was it was like instead of 99% normal stuff. It was now 98% normal stuff, and that means there was more construction going on. So suddenly there was like 5 times more interesting stuff going on. So, oh wow, it must be, which is basically still the minority by far.
This is Rotterdam in the meantime. If we look out of our window, I mean, there have been successive revisions of the modernist ideology to the point that you cannot really say that Rotterdam is a modern city anymore. It's an amalgamation of styles. I mean, in other words, it's a mess. But it's a very nice anarchistic mess in which you feel, as an architect, quite free to operate because you can almost do no damage.
This is a city where things are starting. At that point, 20 years ago, still is there, I think. And where new buildings were built, and so the atmosphere is very positive. Although it's still an ugly city and not so comfortable, but with every new building, people like it. They're optimistic. That's what I like. In Amsterdam, if there's a new building, everyone is complaining for years. And then here, it's, oh, we have a new skyscraper. Because it's, everything is getting better. And in Amsterdam, I think they had that 300 years ago.
I think architecture is, what I like about it, that it's so much more linked to the society. And designers, sometimes it can be almost too much in their own world of materials and shapes and stuff. And of course, not everybody is like that, but I think the impact of architecture is interesting, what it can do on the city and the larger scale.
I mean, we have less and less of a problem admitting that a lot of our inspiration comes from a period in architecture which is in many ways most discarded. If we are postmodernists, which maybe we are, we take our inspiration from a past, but it's an incredibly recent past. It's a past which history has almost overlooked, and therefore our profession can mistake it for originality.
A lot of architects, they have a special style, and they can basically do it all over the world. And people expect them to do that. And for us, it's, well, we try to, of course there are certain elements in our work that are recognizable, but we try to do the opposite, that we look, that our work can have different expressions and styles. It can have pitched roofs, so there's not a kind of pre-designed, pre-configured element.
I think our office works differently because it really works as a collective. It really works as a studio. I think MVRDV works like that to a certain point as well.
So therefore it's good to collaborate with different disciplines and have this bit of a cross-fertilization, but on the other hand, do what you're good at. And that's something that we also keep. And if there's we also do it with graphic designers or model makers and say, hey, they can do it better, why don't we ask them? And then the result is actually sometimes really exciting, that they look from a slightly different angle and give you something that, yeah, wow, this is intriguing. So that's, we really believe in this kind of collaboration.
Here, there really is not a predefined style. I mean, there is a group of people which is composed in a certain way because we think they might have something to say on the subject of the project, that goes at it, and what comes out is as much the result of editing as it is of creation or of instruction. I mean, there is in a way a number of questions that drive the project, but very little predefined solutions.
Each project has its different request and atmosphere and necessity. And of course, our team changes. That's for sure. I think I'm the only stable ingredient of our studio. And of course, people come and go and have different influences on what we design. But certainly the most big influence is, of course, the client and the architect we work with.
And if there is a consistent factor, it's in a way a certain way of thinking or a certain mentality, I guess, rather than a style consistency in the whole thing. And in the fact that there is an ethos in the office, that a project is good when it even can withstand the most basic, obvious criticism.
OMA is one of the few architecture offices that take it serious, that designers like us are already part of the team from the beginning. So we're never an afterthought, like, oh, yes, and now we need some curtains. No, we're really part of the whole thing. Like, how do you come to a building? How do you move through it? What could be viewpoints? What could be the experience? Where would you have more light, less light? Where does color play a role? Where does it have to be very subdued? Where can it be, you know, a surprise and so on? So about the routing and the experience. And so we need to understand completely the project of that architect or city planner and what the intentions are, but also help them or enrich their team by suggesting other possibilities. And of course, vice versa.
The idea itself should not be necessary to understand and to enjoy a project or a building. So in a lot of our work as well is that you don't have to know the theory to like it. And then later on you might think, hey, then the idea comes later on. So it should be understandable for like the user, somebody passing by. And then, but at the same time, the idea could also be explained by somebody else, not the architect. So that's the simplicity of the concept or the idea is a good thing.
If you hear Rem talking about this building, he can explain it in 10 words if he wants. So for instance, it's a cross with a hole, and then
that's the partition.
yeah, and then that's what a model should do, the same thing. So that you look at it and you know what you're looking at, and instead of only an impressive, complicated thing that is only for experts to understand. So it's a communication thing.
If you think in a conceptual starting point, things become more easy to organize and say, well, what do we want to do here? And then if you don't have that, you might get lost into all kind of directions, and the whole outcome is unclear. So we describe ourselves sometimes like a conceptual art architect, and that's not that we only are interested in concepts, but that it is part of the starting point and that you can always describe what you want to do in a very simple way.
No, this for me, this is the level of my understanding. This is a cross with a hole in it, and so that if you can describe it in that kind of way, then I know what to do. So you have to divide it in solid and open, and to keep this diagram, let's say, and that's what architects often forget, because they have too much information. They know everything about the building, and I don't even want to know it. And that's not because I'm lazy, but because it's too much.
Well, Vincent and I makes his own things. Which are very, very nice. He makes models for us, which are very, very nice. But when he makes models for us, he, in a way, is at the tail end of a design process in which many things have been thought out. He needs to kind of pick from those things what he wants to bring forward in order to convey, in a very immediate way, the essence of a project. But it's essentially a project that's finished. What, in a way, we have as a problem is that we need to imagine things before those things are invented. So it's the opposite thing, that when we make models, they're also very simplistic, but they're not simplistic by weeding things out. They're simplistic because we simply don't know everything. So we have to see something in something before it's there. He is almost trained to no longer see the things which are already there, to see the original idea again.
I see it as a sketch more than a. If you try to show everything, then it doesn't communicate. It's like a technical drawing. There you need to see everything because you have to construct it. But this is more, you could say, it's more like a painting. If you paint a tree, you don't paint all the leaves. You paint the tree as a whole, and that's what you do with a building too. I see it as a sketch, but then in materials.
I would like to leave most is never to submit to the idea that you have to produce something, but always have the delight of discoveries drive the process. You know, and in that sense, your own intuition is as much of a measurement as any expectations placed upon you. And often when you rely on your own intuitions, you will find that in the end you are more ambitious than when you simply kind of try to fulfill expectations.
Where we have to work in a kind of force field of all kind of different people with different ideas and intentions. So clients, users, municipalities, politicians, engineers. So it's a whole group which you have to orchestrate sometimes. And sometimes you know that you're not be able to control everything. So you can then say, okay, I'm going to focus on that aspect instead of trying to do it all and lose everything.
We're really in this architectural, I call it a dinosaur profession, because it's still very slow and long and meticulous. And what is interesting about architecture is, of course, that you are not only designing, you're also an anthropologist. You have to read, you have to understand, you have to research, you have to educate yourself with every new project.
But like a journalist, and that goes back, you are one of the last remaining generalists, one of the last types of profession that is actually aimed at making a synthesis rather than pursuing a specialism. And a journalist is that, of course, as well, that with knowing bits and pieces of everything, you make a story and you make a narrative. And particularly when you act with decision makers or politicians, that is a very, very key competence. We often find ourselves actually simultaneously completely powerless as completely powerful. In a way, what I would like to leave most is never to submit to the idea that you have to produce something, but always have the delight of discoveries drive the process. You know, and in that sense, your own intuition is as much of a measurement as any expectations placed upon you. And often when you rely on your own intuitions, you will find that in the end you are more ambitious than when you simply kind of try to fulfill expectations. And in the face of a lot of pressures, I think that is an important thing to kind of keep close to yourself at all times.